let's talk about the small language models, because you've been spending a lot of time there.
For most enterprise use cases, we see that the small language models really work extremely well, right? Because as you said, other than the data that is available publicly, most enterprises have their own data, all right? And then they also are not comfortable in having this data go out of their enterprise, right? And so we are seeing a lot of demand in actually creating small language models with their data specific for their use cases. And we created our own small language models, right? We created one for our Finacle product. So we created a enterprise small language model, then we trained it on banking, and then the data that we have for our Finacle banking product. We also created one for cybersecurity, and we see immense need for creating small language models and a lot of interest for our enterprise clients in this space.
I love the small language models because that's really where these insights are going to happen. We see a world where we're going to go to data collectives, where different competitors or partners start to work together to share information. So think retail, manufacturing, distribution, sharing some of that information, banking, financial services, public sector, working together to share information. And these data collectives are emerged because you're right. To get to the right level of precision that a stakeholder will trust, it might not be there, right? Because that's why we need the smaller language models. Plus also, it's token economics, right? We're spending less on the token side, and we're gonna be a lot more efficient. Yeah, I mean, actually, that's the one thing I learned. Everything comes down to the token.
Right.
I thought about it that way, but once you realize like everything is down to the atomic unit as a token, it changes the way you look at business models.
So that is the other advantage, as you pointed out, from the small language models, right? It is a lot more accurate because you have trained it on your data, all right? Then it is much more cheaper to actually for the inferencing, and then it is more secure because you can run it out of your own infrastructure, and you don't really need to actually have the data go outside your enterprise. So
makes a lot of sense. Now, here's the other thing. When we look at these models going forward, it sounds like we have forward compatibility, reverse compatibility. You can change out the chipset, you can change out the software, you can change out the connectivity, right? We can change a library, you can add a library. I guess we're actually preparing the world for massive flexibility. Is that what you saw as well?
Yes, exactly, right. And so for most of our enterprise clients, where we actually scale out from POCs and pilots to large-scale implementation, the clients want to, there's a need to build AI platforms. For the reasons that you said, you want to be able to build it in such a way that tomorrow your application layer is not tightly coupled with either the model or any of those layers. You can also, by creating a platform, you can embed the responsible AI within that. You can actually put your data pipeline within that. And also you can look at your reusable patterns and build it within platform, right? For example, for a large telecom company in the US, what we built was a platform where we provide RAG as a service, semantic search as a service, right? Now Agentic AI as a service. And so that makes it much more easier for them to actually scale it in different parts of the organization rather than building the same use cases in different areas.
So you're on your way to building your AI factory.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
𝗲𝗲, we've gone from chatbots to copilots and now to agentic AI. It is a transformation that's happened in less than 24 months. So what are you guys doing in agentic AI? And the reason I ask is, everybody's launching their agents, we see them out there, but we've actually discovered an interesting pattern that within the software vendors, their agents are not as sophisticated as agents that are being built by services firms. Right. And that's why I'm asking you, what are you doing with your agents that are different?
Yeah, I think the advantage we have is that we first understand the business context of our client, because we are already doing a lot of work for them, and that becomes extremely important, right? And then also, to be able to execute the actions, you need to know what to actually call to be able to execute a particular action. And so we have understanding of both their processes, and then we have an understanding of the landscape. That helps us actually build agentic AI systems. I can give you a few examples, For one of the large technology companies here, for the product support, and they had manual agents responding to the clients on different issues for the product. We built an agentic AI system that was helping irrespective of whether it is a fact-based query or a troubleshooting query, the agents were able to figure out the type of issue that actually came and how you should actually respond to not just the final resolution, but the diagnostic questions to arrive at the answer, and then based on the answers of the diagnostic questions to be able to arrive at which could be the root cause of the problem, what is the probability, and for each root cause, how you would go about solving that. For another client, this is a large audit firm, we were not only be able to extract the business process for the client company that they would audit, but to run the entire audit itself using agents, right? And those are some of the examples of where we have seen the agent care really work very well.
One of the challenges, a lot of these agents are built in a system and don't go across systems. Why is it so important to be able to pull across different systems, whether it's your ERP, your CRM, your supply chain, your payroll? What are you doing to help make it easier for that interoperability between systems?
Yeah, the reason that you need to be able to go across systems is because that's how humans are executing the process. So what we actually see is a lot of patterns in the kind of work that we do across clients. So what we have started to build is what we call the Agentic Foundry, where we are creating reusable agents that we can actually plug into the different engagements that we actually have. And that is going to be very useful for us to be able to deliver programs on the Agentic AI.
Are you using agents to build agents?
Yeah, that's very interesting. The Copilot agent framework that has actually come in and the others that are there, you can actually build a lot of these much more easily with agents. So using AI to build AI, as Jensen actually talked about, I think that's a way to actually go. Yeah.
One of the interesting challenges that we also have with agents is really deciding when and where you insert a human, right? Assumption is you're going to automate, but the concept is when and where insert a human. That decision tree is changing. Are we at a point where agents are managing agents?
Yeah, so we are actually seeing like orchestration agents that are actually decomposing the problem statement and then actually calling multiple agents, and the agents also interacting with each other. That is always there. And the question that you asked about, we are still initially, we are building the system in such a way that you have humans in the loop, but we also take feedback from the humans, right? So for example, we would say that, so you do an exception for your top customer, right? And so human would actually say, I would give an exception for that. I would not apply the regular rule. But then the way that we're building the systems is that we ask the human whether you want to make this rule in the way that I actually execute in future, and we go and update the standard operating procedure. And so those agentic AI systems are not just actually built once in design time, but they're continuously learning and becoming better and better as they actually execute.
Right, because when you make an exception or when you don't follow the rule, those false positives get built into the models because you want to know contextually what happened. Right? Was this a one-off? Is this repeatable? Is it situational? Where's it going to head?
Yeah, exactly. I think.
Where's the future of agents going? Like, what will we see like around this time next year? You put on a crystal ball and say, here's my forecast.
Yeah, I think today we are still talking about agents within the enterprise. I think in 1 year from now, I think we will see agents across enterprises, because today the organizations are interconnected, and so not only you have to work with your CRM, your ERP systems, you might actually have to work with the vendor, supplier systems, etc. Right? And so I think it's going to be near future, we would actually have agents working across different enterprises. There are things that have to be actually done from a foundation perspective to make sure that the agents that you're working with are trustworthy, and how that interaction is going to happen. But there's a lot of developments happening in that space, and it's only a matter of time when you would have agents working across systems, across enterprise.
Well, today we have Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. Will your agents have Bring Your Human to Work Day?
That's a nice way to think about it. Yeah, I think we are building systems today that we still have human in the loop, but they will become more and more sophisticated. But there is certainly a role of humans still, right? Because they're just helping you to do your work far more efficiently. But the entire creativity, the empathy, all of those things are something that you can't actually replace. Right?
Well, we're listening to the future of agents and more importantly, trying to understand where agentic AI is hanging out, it's headed forward in the future. With the maturity of AI, one of the things that's important is how people are looking at their ethics and their responsibility frameworks. This is a big issue, and it really depends culturally in other areas. A long time ago, we came up with 5 areas around explainability, having transparency, explainability, the ability to actually reverse something, the ability to continuously learn, and of course, put a human in the loop. And those are 5 pillars at the basic level. But that's not enough. We've actually moved on beyond that, and those were what we call level 1, basic level requirements for ethics. Where do you see responsible AI headed today, and what's the balance between innovation and regulation?
Yeah, so for the enterprises that we work with, they're mostly in regulated industries, so this topic becomes extremely important. And one of the approaches that we took in Infosys is to actually implement it ourselves. So our board was also asking, how would you make sure that you're compliant with all the regulatory requirements, and then you're doing it in an ethical manner, and then also the whole aspect of security of what you're actually building also becomes extremely important. So the way we looked at it was first to actually establish what is responsible AI, because the definition and what you actually measure changes and it's sometimes subjective. So we came up with actually 12 different dimensions on what we actually mean is responsible. And then we came up with what you can actually, how you go about mitigating the risk for each of them. In some case, you can't completely eliminate the risk, but you can actually manage the risk. And then we also came up with how do we measure where we are with respect to each of those risks. And what we realized is that it becomes, trying to manage this manually becomes extremely hard and very, very effort intensive. So
are you using AI to manage?
Yeah. So we are using some amount of technology to actually manage this. We have built automated guardrails. For example, in some of the industries like healthcare, you're sending some data out, you can't actually have any personal identifiable information, right?
Those HIPAA laws are pretty tough, and the PII rules around that.
So for example, you are using an X-ray and using AI to do that, you need to be able to take out within the X-ray the personal identifiable information of who is that. So we are using AI to actually anonymize data before you actually send that. Similarly, we have put in a lot of other automated guardrails where we are using AI to actually help in managing AI responsibly.
So you're proactively mitigating the risk before it even happens. And then of course you have automated guardrails that are in the back. And then of course in every region you might have a different policy that you can actually add on top. So it sounds like you built a very flexible framework.
Yeah, we did. And one other thing that we did recently, Ray, is that we open source what we actually built. We did it a couple of weeks back to be open source toolkit. We are working with a few universities, few industries, and then we thought the best way, for exactly the reasons that you actually mentioned, is to actually open source a base framework, and then you can, based on the industry, based on the geography, you can actually have people actually contribute, and that way, as a community, we'll have a much richer framework.
So responsible AI apparently is not that hard. We've kind of laid out where the frameworks are. We kind of laid out what people are looking for. And of course, people can find out more and read about the 12 items that you guys look at on the Infosys website. So
absolutely.
all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.